So I have a story. Maybe some of you have laid bricks. Shouldn't be that hard. You put a little mortar down, you put the brick there, and then, it's a little leaning to the left, so you nudge it a little bit to straighten it, and then it's leaning to the other way, and then you nudge that a little bit, and then it slides out of line entirely, and then you push it back in line, and then that original corner is sticking up again. And you try it. Have you ever tried that? It's not easy to get a nice, even brick wall. I don't know how our ancestors did it. I read a story about his name is, oh dear, but he was a rabbi monk. He lives in Australia. And when he was just starting out there, they had just bought the land. There was nothing on it. They were living in tents, building their monastery up from the ground. And so he had to learn everything, including bricklaying. And he had a lot of trouble with this brick wall, but he had patience. And being a monk, he had lots of time, and he worked on that brick wall and worked on it. And every time a brick went out, he kept on nudging it until he got it perfect. Every brick was perfect. He was so proud of his wall. And he stood back when he finished it, and then he saw 2 bricks that were slanted. Oh, he was devastated. He wanted to tear down the wall. He went to the abbot, please, let me just tear it down and start over. There's 2 bricks. Look, they're ruining the whole wall. And the abbot says, no, bricks got to stay. So he did the second best thing. When he brought people through to show the monastery off, he would always skirt around that part, and so they wouldn't see his brick wall with those mistakes, those bad bricks. About 3 months later, he was walking someone through, and they happened to walk by that brick wall, and the man says, oh, that's a nice brick wall. And the abbot tells us he was affronted. He says, sir, are you visually impaired? This is his exact words, actually. Are you visually impaired? Have you left your glasses in the car? Can't you see those 2 bricks that are slanted, those 2 bad bricks? And the stranger says, yeah, I see them. But I also see the 998 bricks that were put in straight. And this changed the whole way that this monk was looking at his wall. In fact, it changed the way he thought about life in general, thinking about what this man had said. Yeah, for the first time in 3 or 4 months as he built that brick wall, he could see the other bricks, not just the ones that were crooked. He saw them all, and he says, oh, well, actually it is a nice brick wall, actually. So interestingly, 20 years later, he's telling the story. 20 years later, he says, now I look at the brick wall, I can't even see the ones that were slanted. I don't know where they are. And so it is. We all have our own brick walls that we own, that's us. And sure enough, there'll be some bricks in there that are a little slanted, but there's an awful lot. Most of the bricks are well placed. And when we keep on focusing on this feeling of guilt over things that have happened, it just perpetuates this feeling and causes us to amass more and more and more guilt over different things. And it's time to just let go of that sort of thing. I don't know if you can get the idea, but when we can do this, when we can see all the good bricks in our life and don't look at the bad bricks with as much scrutiny as we have, something wonderful happens. A wonderful insight opens like a flower in the heart. And as Jesus said, we will know the truth, and the truth will set us free. And like this monk, we will not even see or notice those few bad bricks anymore. Oh, we have a story in the Bible that's one of our favorites. It's about the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve and their life there. And it was such a lovely garden. And I don't know why Satan was allowed in there, but he was slithering around. And Eve is sitting there on this lawn, petting a, a rabbit, cooing at it, and there's a babbling brook nearby, and the sun is shining. And in fact, the sun is always shining, but it feels like it's just a rainstorm just passed through, but you never see a rainstorm. It's always 70. The perfect garden. You couldn't ask for a better place to sit there, and the animals are tame, and here comes Satan. And he is upset seeing her so happy. And then this idea comes into his head, a perfectly devilish idea. And so he goes over to the tree of knowledge of good and evil and takes a piece of fruit. Walks up to Eve and says, Eve, here's some of the fruit. Oh, have you tried that fruit? Oh, it is really good. It is better than anything you probably even tasted so far. And Eve says, what? No. Father told me not to eat that fruit. Says, is he here? Do you see him? Just try it. And says, well, she's not wanting to. So he has to use some persuasion, devilish persuasion. He says something like this. Listen, you have no idea what you're missing. Eating this fruit will open your eyes, so you'll be able to see a world that is so marvelous. It has opposites. It has light and day. It has bad times and good times, evil, sickness, pain, and pleasure, happiness. And Eve thinks about that. She kind of goes silent. And she's thinking. And Satan just kind of stands there waiting, hoping that he was good in his rhetoric, persuasive rhetoric. And she says, what is this thing called imperfect? What are these things called opposites? Here I am, the curator of this marvelous garden, but what is this? What is it all about? He called it knowledge. Do I want this knowledge? I think maybe I do. And so she says to the old snake, she says, let me ask you one more question. Isn't there any other way that I can gain this knowledge besides eating the fruit? And he says, no, there is no other way. So she takes the fruit and she takes a bite. And well, a while later, if their life had suddenly become chaos, they're running around the garden looking for something to put on. And they find something to put on and they leave behind a bush, now hiding from the father, which they would have never thought to do before then. Why would they do that? Why would they hide from the father? Anyways, so Eve says to Adam, she says, I know this looks like a bad idea, but I think actually we're going to learn from this, and it's actually going to be a good thing. Just hold on, and let's see where this leads. It's an interesting thing about this world. In this land of opposites, where every perfect thing is countered by something imperfect, the challenge is to see everything as perfect. To see the good in all, and to see the beauty in random events which at first sight seem ugly. So, this is a twist on an old story. Many religions today look at Eve and they say, oh my goodness, we're all suffering now because of Eve fell to eating that fruit. Oh, I'm going to twist that around. I don't totally disagree with that. I think that what Eve did and convinced her husband to follow was a blessing to us. Something that we needed, something that we wanted to experience. We'll pass through it. Actually, a stupid thing to say because we have never left God's presence, just have forgotten. And so we're having this experience. I'm rather enjoying myself, to tell you the truth. So let us stand up tall and face this life as if it were an adventure, not a punishment for Eve's transgression. Let us consider our life, the hand of God shaking us up a bit, so that when it's all over with, we'll have some wonderful memories of this place with opposites. And there's something else that we get from being here. We'll be filled with the grace of God. What is grace? A sure knowledge that we are not alone. We just can't see the obvious. That we are filled with light, and that light is God. I bet you some of you are gardeners. Any gardeners? Where's? Yeah, there you go. I know a few.
We're trying to learn.
This is a story about a garden. And maybe your garden is this garden. This person had this garden, and it was known to be the most beautiful, immaculate, inspiring garden in the whole region. And he would spend hours each morning going through this garden and making it perfect. Well, just one day that I'm talking about, a fairy arrived and he hid behind a bush to, I don't know if fairies have gender. We'll call it a he, even though it's a fairy. And this fairy is hiding behind a bush. He's not just any old fairy. He's a master gardener. And he's come to see why this person's garden is known to be the most inspiring. So he's watching. And this is what this man does. He has some baskets and he sits there under the plum tree. There's this beautiful plum tree in the middle of the garden, and it's just the crown of the garden. And he's looking at all the leaves and twigs and bark and things. He picks one up at a time. He looks at it and thinks about it. And if it pleases him, if he thinks it's just perfect twig or leaf, he puts it in one of his baskets. If it doesn't please him, he puts it in a separate basket for the rubbish heap. And he does this for a long time. He picks up every single twig and does this. And then he has a nice drink and he relaxes for the next very crucial part of his gardening that morning. He takes each of the leaves and twigs and bark and he places it in the garden on the ground, just in the right place, just at the right angle. If it's not doesn't please him, he picks it up and moves it, and when he's done, this garden looks so amazingly nice and well placed. And this man is just a master of color and texture, and the garden truly does look inspiring after he's done all this work. Then the fairy, mischievous at heart, as all fairies are, even master gardener fairies, and he popped out from behind the bush and he says, oh my goodness, congratulations, I've been watching you all morning, and this is you are a master at designing your garden. And all I have to tell you, this garden of yours is almost perfect. The man almost falls down right on the spot. He feels a pain shooting through his body as if a scorpion had bit him. And he stutters and he says to the fairy, what do you mean almost perfect? He goes, well, that's what I said. He goes, oh, master gardener fairy, please send forth your compassion upon me and tell me what I can do to make my garden truly a perfect garden. And the fairy says, oh, really? Do you want me to show you? And he had that mischievous fairy smile. He goes, very well. Yes, please, show me. So he flies over and lands on the trunk of the plum tree, and then grabs it with his little hands, and he shakes the hell out of it. And he does this. Leaves are falling everywhere. Twigs are falling everywhere, and it keeps on falling, and the man is mortified with what's happening to his garden, and when there's no more leaves that will fall, the fairy stops shaking, and he kind of hovers there in front of the man, and the man is devastated. He wants to kill the fairy really bad. But then the fairy smiles and he says, there, now your garden is true, perfect. So, people, like gardens, don't have to be perfect in order to be perfect. See the world's chaos as perfect and love the world as it is in all its shades of good and bad. There is a secret at the core of my message today, and this is what it is. Once your world is filled with love, there is only beauty. No sin, only sainthood. No enemies, only friends and loved ones, and pain will fade into the background until it fades completely from your life. This monk used to go out to the prisons and visit the inmates there. And he noticed something right away, that they all feel guilty. They don't show it on the outside. They put on their prisoner face of indifference or defiance when people are watching them. But if you're their friend, they'll break down and they'll tell you the truth, that really all of them feel intense guilt for the thing they did that landed them there in prison. One such man was talking to this monk, Buddhist monk, and he was saying, I'm here because I murdered a man. I had a fit of rage and I murdered him. And now I feel terrible. I feel the deepest kind of guilt. And the monk says, oh, okay, that's interesting. Can you tell me about the rest of your life? What did you do? And the man's face brightened and he says, oh, let me tell you. And he told him all the wonderful things that he had done in his life and interesting things. And none of them were bad. And then he says, well, what about the day you murdered that man? Tell me what else happened that day. And he did. And it was an interesting day. And none of those things were bad. And yet he murdered a man and he shouldn't have done that. But for the rest of his life, now, his title is murderer. Ooh, kind of like Gollum. You're a murderer. Remember that part in there? And he couldn't get away from that guilt because he had killed someone. And so the story ought to be obvious. It's not, yes, he was a murderer, he shouldn't have done that, but so much more of his life was wonderful. And he needed to start looking at that other part of his life and let go of his guilt so he can heal and move on. There is a message here which applies not only to inmates, but to anyone doing time in the prison of guilt. That crime for which we feel guilty, what else did we do that day, that year, this life? A friend of mine and I were hiking in, what's her name? I don't remember the name. Something near Mildred Knife Park, over there, out of Oakland, out in the wilderness. And we come down out of this canyon into a small meadow, and the trail went through the meadow, and there, standing in our way, from edge to edge so we could not pass, were about 20 steers in a semicircle, all staring at us straight on. And we go, oh, that's interesting. We couldn't get by without pushing the steers aside. Then all as one mind, they all took one step forward. This is a true story, I swear it. And we didn't know what to think about this. 20 steers, any one of them could destroy us, if they knew they could. Took a step forward, and a moment later, it happened again. They all took another step forward towards us. And my friend, he couldn't take any more, and he waved his hands and screamed and ran at them, and they got spooked and ran in the other direction, and we hurried on our way. And I'll never forget the feeling of 20 steers all taking a step. It's right out of some cartoon. You know, who would ever think that they would do that? I don't know why to this day. The steers are a lot like our negative, troublesome memories, pinning us in. And sometimes all it takes is for us to scream and run at them to make them scatter to the wind. And then say, see what's behind all that, the person that we really are. And then you take off our sandals as you approach your inner self. For you are, at your core, holy ground, a burning bush, a blessing to the world. So Adam and Eve, going back to that. Adam and Eve. Like them, we have all partaken of the tree of knowledge. We can let the fruit poison us and bind us into a prison of guilt, or we can take the higher road to see life as a marvelous opportunity for the sublime experience of being human. This twist in perspective is free. It has the power to save us from ourselves. Now remember Marley, Scrooge's business partner, and he forged the chains that bound him, as we're told. And I'm wondering, though, if those chains were a result of some cosmic force punishing him, or the result of Marley's opinion of himself that he couldn't let go of. The most difficult stage in the journey of life, in the most difficult stage of the journey out of guilt is convincing ourselves that we deserve to be forgiven. Let me repeat that. The most difficult part of the journey out of guilt is realizing that we deserve to be forgiven. Let it happen. In conclusion, life is not a curse. It is a beautiful, spectacular, unbelievably wondrous experience. My life is filled with beauty and love and joy every single day. And this is my life. It's what we all have. It's who we are. Oh, yeah, I wrote here, warts and all. It's okay. The words are okay. Let them be what they are. So back to grace. Look for God's grace, and a little at a time, grace will reveal its face to you. It will take you by the hand and lead you through this valley of the shadow of death, as if it were the Garden of Eden. And I say unto you, my friends, in conclusion, I see the Christ in you.